What's up, guys? This is former UFC fighter Elliot Marshall, and you are listening to The Blueprint. I believe that there's a blueprint of how the most successful people structure their lives. They don't all do it the same. They don't all do the same things. And on this podcast, you're going to hear inspirations, motivations, and stories about how they go through their life. These stories will give you clues and tricks of exactly how you can discover your passion, find your power, and then go give your purpose to the world. Thank you so much for listening. Let's jump into this week's episode. What up, guys? How you doing? This episode of the podcast is with AJ Vaynerchuk. I don't think he needs much of an introduction. You all heard the last name. He is the brother of Gary Vaynerchuk, you know, the famous serial entrepreneur, as AJ describes it. So we discussed so much what it's like being Gary's brother, starting a business with him, leaving that business, as you'll hear about. So I don't want to jump into too much of it. Such a great podcast. Here we go. AJ Vaynerchuk. AJ, my dude, how you doing?
I'm great, brother. How about you?
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I know you're busy running the ship over there.
I appreciate it, man. No, happy to jam. Looking forward to it.
Man, so we met each other because of a good friend of both yours and mine, Lloyd, who look, I don't like many agents. I think most of them are sleazy, don't really care, and just butcher the sport in a way almost, and aren't really good for the athletes. But Lloyd is a different breed for me, you know. So
yeah, agreed.
We met through Lloyd coming on and working with you guys at VaynerSports. Yep. So how did VaynerSports come about? You know,
that's a long story. Do you want me to start from the get-go?
Yeah, start from the get-go. Let's go.
All right. So, couple things. I think.
Hey, look, hold on before we go. Let's just get the obvious out of the way. You're Gary V's brother, right?
I am.
There we go. So the obvious is out of the way, everyone, so that when you're listening here, yes, this is Gary Vaynerchuk's brother. So anyway, VaynerSports. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it involves him, and it starts there. Like, it starts being a little kid. So Gary and I are 11 years apart, and because we're 11 years apart, when it comes to my sports fandom, I didn't really have a choice. I was brainwashed, right? Like Gary was like, made it very much his mission. Like, all right, I got a little homie here. He likes sports. I like sports. He's going to rock with the same teams I rock with. And, you know, for me, that's my older brother. That's my best friend. That's my mentor. I looked up to him. So that was easy. Unfortunately for me, he made some bad decisions that primarily made my sports fandom tied to the New York Jets and the New York Knicks, which there's been some moments along the way, right? Like when I was like 10, 11, 12, it was good, right? The Jets went to the AFC Championship game when I was 11, and then the Knicks went to the NBA Finals when I was 12. So I was like, okay. Then
the non-Jordan years.
Correct.
Yes.
As a Knicks fan, Jordan just stopped anything.
Look, Jordan ruined everybody, right? Jordan ruined almost every other person's fandom.
But like if Michael Jordan's not born, if you look at it, because the one year when Jordan took a break, the Knicks made the finals in '94 when Jordan was on his break. So it was like very clear that the Knicks were that second best team in the East for that entire run. I was super little for that, right? Like the NBA finals in '94, I was 7.
Okay.
So like I watched. But, you know, there's a difference.
You didn't really care. You cared because Gary cared.
Exactly. Like there's when I was 11, I cared. They ended up getting blown out of the building by the Spurs, like Duncan and Robinson and that team. Gary actually took me to one of those games. I went to an NBA Finals game at the Garden, got their ass kicked. You know, Latrell Sprewell, Allen Houston, that crew. Anyway, so I'm a diehard sports fan. And then also just like a diehard collector. Like I'm a collector by nature. I'm the kid that I collected wrestling figures. I was super into wrestling when I was little. I collected Pokemon cards. So I'm 36 for context. So Pokemon was dead smack in like middle school, like the game on Game Boy and the cards. That was everything in my school. And then sports cards too. That's how I learned sports. You know, sports cards and video games is how I learned sports, right? Because I would get a pack of cards and I would flip the back over and I'd see their stats and where they went to college and all that stuff, right? And then video games, playing Madden, NBA Live, FIFA, NHL, etc. So that sets the foundation. And then the next step is, I referenced Madden. I grew up in a household of entrepreneurship. My dad's an entrepreneur. My brother's is an entrepreneur, right? So entrepreneurship is what I always saw. It was my exposure to like post school, and it's all I really knew. My mom stayed at home with the kids. My dad was an entrepreneur. My brother was an entrepreneur. And
Did your dad do more than the wine shop?
That's what he always did, and what he still does. Now he did some like he's a landlord. He owns some properties.
Okay. Yep.
Primarily, own and operating the wine library. And so, I think because of that influence, and then because of my interest in sports, like I would play Madden as a kid in middle school, and I would play the game, but 95% of my time was actually played in franchise mode, like being the general manager of the Jets and drafting and doing contracts and free agency and things of that nature. So I always gravitated towards.
That's hilarious because I hated that part. I couldn't stand that part. Okay.
All I did. I was the opposite. Because for me, I played the video game and it became pretty redundant pretty fast. I'm a good player. I beat the other part too, I think that has to be important is when I'm 11, my brother is out of the house and my sister's out of the house. So I'm an 11-year-old kid that's kind of got like two phases of childhood where I don't have a sibling to hang with. And where I grew up in New Jersey was the middle of fucking nowhere. And so like Monday through Thursday, I was just at my house and chilling. Friday, Saturday, I'd be able to see some friends and that was cool.
Right.
I couldn't ride my bike anywhere. I didn't have that type of childhood. I couldn't jump on a bike and go see friends. My closest friend lived like 11-minute drive away. Like that wasn't a thing.
So that wasn't happening during the week. My childhood, very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't have that. And so a lot of my entertainment came from like the computer and video games and playing against the computer, even on all Madden mode, I'd go out there and I'd win 35-6 and it wasn't fun. But franchise mode, there's all these variables and I could do different things. And even when I got into like high school and I'd hang with my friends, we would do like 4-person franchise modes on a Saturday, and hang. So I always loved that part about it. I love the intersection of sports and business. I love the NBA draft, the NFL draft, like all that stuff. I was always into like beyond the surface level sports is where I was. So then that kind of sets the foreground. I then go to college and Gary and I always know we want to start a business together. And we land on the idea in 2009, I'm graduating. We landed on the idea of starting a social media advertising agency. And the way we landed on that was economy was bad in 2009. Stocks were on the downturn, like the economy was not doing well in 2008 and 2009. So we wanted to do something that was a little bit of a safer business. And at that point, Gary had been, call it 2 to 3 years into having success building his own brand via things like Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And he was getting approached by companies. He was speaking, talking about how he built his own audience, and companies were like, cool, like you did this for yourself. Can you do it for us? And it sounds obvious today, social media strategy and marketing, but that industry did not exist in 2009.
Sure, no.
We really blazed the trail. And so we just—
In 2009, I think MySpace was still a thing.
Yeah. It was fading at that point.
It was fading, but it was still a thing.
Yeah, it was still a thing.
And no one knows what that is right now.
Right. And in 2007, 2008, and 2009, when Gary was really doing it, like MySpace was a thing. I remember even earlier, like 2005, 2006. So, brands were coming to Gary and saying, hey, like, love what you had to say on your talk or in that video you did. Like, can you help our business? And so that's kind of how we built the business, was off that initial interest of brands wanting Gary to help. And then we started hiring people and we built that business, and it still exists today. My brother has expanded it beyond just the ad agency to creating this holding company, VaynerX. I think it's nearly 2,000 employees globally.
Are you still in that business?
I'm not. No, I left that business a while ago. Yeah.
Okay.
So to that point, I was a chief operating officer of VaynerMedia, the ad agency, and kind of the growth of that business was, it started off as Gary and I, along with a few of my friends from high school and college, close friends of mine that, were excited by what we wanted to do. And then we started hiring people with actual advertising. It was funny. We were like a 6-person advertising agency, and not one of the 6 people had a single moment of even internship experience, let alone ad agency experience.
You want to know like the people that work for me at Easton, how much business experience as far as we have zero.
I think I love that though. I think it's a fresh perspective, right?
Yeah, and 0.
And so, we built that up. It was like 6 employees the first year, then like a dozen the next year, and then about 30 the year after that, and then it kind of exploded. We got from like 30 to a buck 50 to like 300, 300 to 400, 400 to 550. And when I left, we were like 750 people.
Why'd you
And that
leave?
was so important part of the story. When I was a sophomore in college, I got diagnosed with something called Crohn's disease, which I still suffer from today. There's no cure for it. You can only really maintain it. And so I had Crohn's, and that I had probably developed it sometime like in my teenage years, as I think back, but officially diagnosed at 19. And the thing with Crohn's is there's a lot of variables for how do you manage it. And one of the biggest variables is stress. And for me, growing that business and being in that industry was very stressful. It's a nasty cycle where I have a very strong work ethic, and I set my expectations for myself very high. And so here's the cycle that I really suffered with towards the end of Vayner and made me pull the plug. Busy, lot going on, get stressed. Stress then creates problems for my stomach. Then my stomach shutting down and creating issues kind of controls my whole body, like my mind and my body. So then I need to take a day off maybe on a Wednesday. But then I took my day off, and now I'm a full day of work behind, and I get more stressed, and then more stress, more sick. And it was just this vicious snowball cycle. And I tried a bunch of stuff, and I really gave it a real at bat. I ran as COO of Vayner for 7 years. So I really tried to figure it out. And I just came to the conclusion that I wasn't going to physically be able to do it. It culminated with me having like intestinal surgery and missing a couple of weeks of work. And I really struggled badly. I sought out therapy, and therapy helped a lot, but also therapy helped me come to the conclusion that I needed to do something different.
So what was in this do something different piece? Yeah. Obviously, you're in business with your brother here.
Yeah.
And he's a goer too, right? Obviously. Exactly. What did that do to y'all's relationship?
I think it really wasn't a strain at all. My brother had empathy for it. He supported me fully. I think something that maybe helped was that he so understood, not necessarily exactly what I was going through with my stomach and the stress, but, my brother essentially left day-to-day operations of my father's business too. So he had been in a situation where he was in my shoes, right? Where my brother's career started full-time day-to-day with my dad in the wine business. And my brother's actually still involved, but not day-to-day. Like he was going into the office every single day in Jersey. And then right around like a year or two into Vayner, when we realized that we could build a monster, and he left the wine business primarily because of the shitty rules and regulations around selling wine in America. It's state by state. So like you can't sell in Pennsylvania. My brother's like, well, fuck that. Like, why can't I sell in Pennsylvania? This blows. Like, that's an entire state I can't do business in. So I think my brother needed to get away from a highly regulated industry that kind of could control how successful he could be. And once he realized what Vayner was going to be, that's when he kind of shifted. Because the first year or two of VaynerMedia, Gary was kind of both in of wine, like he was one in, one out, trying to do both. And he then turned it up when we saw the opportunity to really build something special.
So as the COO, when you're the COO of a company like this, what was like, what did that look like? Like what was the thing that was adding to all this stress, right? So, because you hear these terms a lot, right? I'm a CEO, I'm a COO. And like, like sometimes a lot of work and sometimes like just some dumb title.
Totally. I can assure you it was more of a lot of work aspect. Which was good though. I was fucking young and hungry, and I was very capitalistic. I wanted all the money. That's how I saw it. And I was like 24, living in New York, having success. And so I wasn't afraid of the work. I work just as hard now with very different results in terms of how I manage stress and what I'm doing. That role as COO evolved. In the first year or two, it was just a dumb title because we had like 12 employees and a few clients. But call it I'm 20, 25, 26. We've got 150 to 200 employees. I'm the COO. At the point, we don't have a CFO, for example. So I actually managed and ran our finances with no finance degree, no accounting degree, no. And I'm talking like we were doing like we were probably doing like 25 to $30 million in revenue, and I was running our finances, which is so in hindsight ridiculously stupid.
Ridiculous.
But I was good with math, and it was fine, thank God. And agency business isn't complicated. You pay your staff, you pay your rent, you get your client dollars in, and where's the profit? It wasn't overly complicated. So I was able to do it, but thankfully we wised up and hired a real CFO and made that choice. But I was COO, and that meant wearing a lot of hats. I was going into new business pitches. I was overseeing finance. I was overseeing legal. Thank God we were smart enough to hire our general counsel, who's now general counsel and COO of VaynerX, Mark Yutkin. One of the best things we ever did. I oversaw HR. I was really the one that ran the internal side of the business. Gary was dominating getting our business, right? Gary, if you know Gary, he has the vision. He's a salesman at heart, and he is great at building relationships. So he was on the road. He traveled, I don't know, 150 to 200 days a year. I traveled like 10 because I was mainly back home holding down the fort, hiring. We went from 25 to 150 people in a year. That means we hired 125 people. So like hiring people, coming up with creative ideas. I was coming up with campaign ideas, like literally doing everything. So we switched offices, I want to say 6 times in 7 years. And so I was always the one to find our next office, build out, like I was managing architects and general contractors, like literally anything and everything.
You tell me if this is too personal, okay? Man, so you guys are both just killing it, right? Like as far as on the work end.
Yeah.
But Gary's blowing up.
Yeah.
Like social media as a famous person, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like you were working any less. You were just a behind the scenes guy on the work, right?
Yeah.
What was that like for you? Like, and if you don't want to answer this question.
No, easy. Okay. No problem. It was easy. Gary and I are so similar in so many ways, but we're also different in a few. And I think one thing that was really healthy for our relationship at that time was there was never any confusion between CEO and COO, right? Like when Gary and I started VaynerMedia, he was already a decade into his career. He was already very successful. He had already established a bunch of great relationships that ended up being our first few clients for VaynerMedia. So I feel like if we were like 2 years apart, we would have been more competitive with one another. But since we were 11 years apart and he had already had so much success without me, it was like, I saw it as like, I'm excited to have my brother help me, mentor me, guide me so that I can be successful. And I'm excited. And he already had built his personal brand. It wasn't like we started VaynerMedia and then he was getting famous. We started VaynerMedia because he was getting famous, right? Like he had already had over 1 million followers on Twitter when we started VaynerMedia. So it wasn't as if like there was no angle.
It wasn't like your work was getting him famous.
Exactly. It wasn't that at all.
Got it. Okay.
Exactly. So that because of that, there was zero resentment or jealousy or issue.
Sure.
But then the other thing that I think is important is my brother thrives on like being out in public and people grabbing him and asking him for help or like, whereas I don't. Like there's not a single part of me that wants to be famous. I don't care. I don't care about it at all.
Sure.
So I think that helps too, honestly.
It's hard sometimes if you don't truly embrace your role, right? Like visionary and operator. Like these are super important roles with super different characteristics of just the individual, right? Of just the individual. Man, I hate doing work. I hate operating. I can't fucking stand it.
Yep.
And the person who operates mostly our business, he does not like going into school.
That's right.
And teaching classes and being this.
That's exactly right.
So, but I think people can struggle with this.
No question. What's interesting though is I thrived being in my 20s and operating. I loved like, okay, we had a day, I want to say it was like January year 5. I think it was like January 4th, 2014-ish. Maybe I'm off by a year.
Sure.
But it was the first day in January after the new year, and we had made a bunch of hires because we had a bunch of new business starting in January. We had 28 employees start on the first Monday of January one year.
Fuck.
and I thrived on like, how do we find these people? Where do they go? Resource management. How do we onboard them well? Who do we connect them with? Like all this stuff, right? And so But I think what's been interesting is people evolve, and honestly, I've been taking inventory over the last year or so, and I'm actually trying to like move away from the operational side and be a little bit more of like go out there, business development, because like I just think I'm at a place in my career where I've done, almost 15 years of operating, and I know it like the back of my hand, but I'm not gaining the same fulfillment from it. I see that I can replace a lot of what I'm doing with other people that are ready to embrace and take those roles. And what's best for my business and my clients is for me to kind of evolve myself and be a little bit more on the other side of the business spectrum.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's rewind now. You have to step away. What was that like for you personally?
It was cathartic. I was always the kid that knew what was what next. I was always the kid that worked my tail off. Like I was, I grew up in an immigrant. I'm a first generation, grew up in an immigrant household where work ethic was literally like the number one trait that mattered. Like work, if there was like a rankings of what the Vaynerchuk household valued in, the 90s and early 2000s, like work ethic might have been the top attribute. And I think a lot of that just comes from the fact that like my family came over here dirt poor, had nothing, and without work ethic, they would have never been able to make a life for themselves. So I always worked really hard. And I was always the kid that had a plan. I knew what college I was going to go to, early admission, like all that stuff. We started VaynerMedia 2 months before I graduated college. Like I never had a time period to kind of like chill and reflect and identify and take my time. And so that was the thing. I had planned my departure from VaynerMedia over the course of a year. When I told Gary I was leaving, I didn't leave 2 weeks later. I left a year later. And that year was backfilling myself, making sure that whatever I was bottlenecking or in control of, I was offboarding. Frankly, the last like 2 or 3 months, I wasn't doing anything except just showing up and making sure that if there was like an issue that I was the only person I knew the answer to, I would answer it. But I was just hanging out, honestly, the last like 2 months. So my main thing was when I left, I wanted to have no plan. That was like the most important thing to me. And I was financially secure and I didn't have kids and it was fine. And I wanted that. I wanted that bad. And I had a bunch, because I went public with my departure. I wrote like a public article about leaving Vayner and my health issues and all that. So I had a lot of people reach out, be like, hey man, like, see that you're burned out of the ad agency space, like come do this with me or come run this business for me. And so I had like 10 job offers in like the 3 months going into my departure. And I said no to all of them. I didn't even have the conversation. Not in a disrespectful way, not in an egotistical way, but because literally the only thing I wanted when I left VaynerMedia was to not have a plan. And so my plan was to take a year off. I want to take a sabbatical for a year. And it started in May of, I want to say, was it May of 16? Either May of 16 or 15, I can't remember. And I think 16. And yeah, I had no plan. I wasn't taking any meetings. I wasn't exploring anything. My initial time away was awesome. My wife and I got a house in Martha's Vineyard. She grew up in the Boston area, so Martha's Vineyard was like a popular vacation area for her. We rented out a house from like Memorial Day to Labor Day. So we were out there basically June, July, and August. I was walking my dog every day. I was playing a bunch of golf. We were having friends visit us. I was cooking every meal, like grilling, fresh catch on the grill for lunch. It was awesome. And I just hit the reset button. And I took time. And then like after like a month, I was kind of like, okay, I love this, but like I'm like 29 years old and I'm a competitive dude. I need some action. And so what I had was
let me ask you a question. So when you're 29 years old, you're a month in, like when you say you're financially stable, are you financially stable for the rest of your life? Like you don't have to go back to work?
If I were to adjust my lifestyle and pare it down some, I could have retired.
Okay.
But we were doing well. I bought a nice house. Like if we sold our house, moved into a different area and pared back on some luxuries, I could have effectively never worked again.
Cool.
Yeah.
Look,
not
I think
like in a rich, lavish, amazing way, but in a very like I could have retired middle class and comfortable. I could have.
Got it. That's a decision maker on whether or not people are going back to work.
By the way, that was part of what I reflected on was like,
sure.
Do I sell the house? Do we like cancel a few things and take one less trip a year? And like, do I just do this? But after a month, I'm like, that's definitely not what I'm doing, because I think I would go crazy. I would just go crazy. I'd be bored.
Yeah. Sure.
But I thought about it. I'm like, could I literally just like golf forever and just chill? And I couldn't. So,
I mean, I know I can't either, bro. Like, I don't, you know, like where the schools are, again, I wouldn't be, I'm not fucking rich, you know, like fucking flying private jets and going wherever the hell I want. But I could just chill and like, you know, do nothing, teach a couple classes.
Exactly.
And pare my life down. Right.
Right. Exactly. So that was a situation I was in. I think I spent a month kind of dissecting that question. And then when that became very clear to me that that wasn't the answer, I started, what I had in my exposure, what I had in my hands was investments. You know, Gary and I made investments in companies either through our fund or I did personally. And so I was like, you know what, this is a great way to like kind of get my juices going a little bit, but I don't have any responsibility. I'm not the operator. I'm not the CEO. I'm just an investor trying to bring value. And so I was just checking in with some of the companies and would take random phone calls. Like I would take my dog for a walk and jump on the phone with an entrepreneur and talk to them about what they're up to. And I would mainly focus my help on like scaling. Like, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. We did great off our initial seed round. We just raised 10 million for our Series A. We need to go hire 80 people and add business units. Like that's where I was having conversations with people because that was the best place I could speak to it. I built a business.
You said this word a couple of times and it's like such a catchy phrase, entrepreneur. What do you define as an entrepreneur? Like, how do you define that?
I define an entrepreneur as somebody that has a vision for a business that they start themselves and that they grow and build and either eventually sell, fail, or operate. And that means you're not going and working for somebody else. You're not going into corporate America. But I keep a very vague and loose definition of entrepreneur.
You keep it loose, right? So
I do.
Got it. I guess my definition, just for differences a little bit, is I would call that more of a business person. Like you just have a business and you do your thing. An entrepreneur, from my perspective a little bit, is you have multiples that you are you're like here and there, and you know, and you might not be running them all. Maybe you're running one of them, but you have all these, you know. I don't feel like I'm full entrepreneur. Like I like
distinction.
Go ahead.
My distinction is I would call what you described a serial entrepreneur.
Okay.
That's how I like. My brother's a serial entrepreneur. Is how I see it.
Okay.
But also there's not a right or wrong.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong. This is just It's just such a catchy thing that you know some kid in their basement calls himself an entrepreneur because you know, and I'm like,
What's kind of cool is it's catchy today, but like Gary was talking about it, like 20 years ago, entrepreneur meant you were a loser.
You were a loser. Yeah. Oh, 100%. You were a loser.
Right? It just mean you had failed businesses. That's what an entrepreneur was.
Or you couldn't get hired and hold a job.
Right. Exactly.
Right. It was like,
so
everyone fires me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's cool that entrepreneurs had this like rebranding and has been looked at upon more favorably. And because our school system doesn't cater towards not our public school system doesn't cater towards entrepreneurship, right? So if you don't fit into that factory worker model that our archaic school system tries to mold, you're a loser, is what it used to be.
God, it's so, you know, I have my kids, like I said, love basketball. We were talking about it offline. And I was just in a meeting with my buddy, who is an athlete as well, a fighter. He was like, and he's black, you know, he's black and Asian. And we were talking about it. And he goes, look, I only judge young kids' athletics if the kid's good, if he can do it against black kids. Because if all he does is do it against rich white kids in the suburbs, it don't fucking count. You know, we were just like joking about it, right? And I was like, I feel the same way, you know? Because like these kids, it's their only way out, right? It's like this is it. So anyway, we have some of these kids on our basketball team, and I'm trying to help them a little bit, and it's kind of fun, you know. And they're like, why? And they ask me like, why don't we learn this in school? And I'm like, because school doesn't want you to do this,
right? Yeah, and listen, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that if I were president, I could fix the scholastic system because it's a behemoth. But as I look at it, you know, when you get into high school, I think it's broken. I'm cool with like my daughter's in kindergarten. I'm not debating the methods to get my daughter to understand how to write the alphabet and count and read. Like I'm good with that. And even middle school, some fundamental stuff like learning basic arts and sciences and history, like cool. But man, when you're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and I reflect that, like what I learned and what other kids are learning. I do believe there's schools out there that provide this. It's awesome. Like you get these alternative opportunities, and it's just the thing that's tough. And school's upward battle is like school is a one size fit all proposition, and obviously we're not all the same. And that's where, and I think I wish there was some like personal finance.
We're not. I was going to say we're not all the same, but dude, come on, let's talk about money, please.
Exactly.
Like, let's talk about money, and whether you're going to be a billionaire or millionaire, or you're going to go work a job. Who cares? But let's teach the kids. These kids ask me what book, like they're like, how you did it? You made all your money fighting, right? I was like, yeah, no, right.
Like the UFC didn't pay what you think they paid back then,
and I wasn't that good, so no.
Right.
So they're like, then what is it? How'd you do? I was like, through business. I was like, through business. And I was like, look, let's read this book. And we're reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yep. Like just understanding what an asset is versus a liability. And those two words are unspoken in school.
100%.
Unspoken. So it's really strange. But anyway, we could go down this rabbit hole forever. You take your year off. You take your month off. You're like starting to talk to some investors, right? What's next? What's the follow up to all of this? Yeah.
So this is how a half hour into your question, I finally answer how VaynerSports came to be. So one of the investments was into a boutique sports agency that had a handful of players in the NFL, and Gary and I both wrote a small check into it. Because we love the space, we love sports, we love business. It was a hobby check. It's like, cool, this will be fun. And, I'm a month or two in and I'm taking these calls with entrepreneurs.
All right. So hold on. You're a month, you write a check and you're like, it's a hobby.
I wrote a check like less than a year before I left Vayner. Maybe like 9 months before I left Vayner, I wrote a check into the sports agency.
Okay.
And I'm a month or two into my sabbatical. And I'm having these calls with entrepreneurs that Gary and I had invested in.
Got it.
And I remember getting off the call. Our business partner, Brian, who's still with VaynerSports today, he was wrapping up a trip, I think, in like Baton Rouge. He was seeing some kids from LSU, and I was on the phone with him. We were talking about it, and I hang up the phone, and my wife, Allie's like, oh, who was that? I was like, oh, that was Brian from the sports agency. And she was just like, I feel like you talk to Brian almost every day. Like, you and Gary invested in over 100 companies. Like, what other entrepreneurs are you talking to daily? And I'm like, none of them. She's like, doesn't that tell you something? And it just hit me. I was like, that does tell me something, right? And so talked to Brian more so, thought about it, made sure. I was like, you know what? I'm definitely going to cut this sabbatical short. I'm not going to cut it. So, this is maybe like 2 months in. We've got another like month and a half left at this house that we rented. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take the summer, but after Labor Day, I'm back, kind of thing. And so
what'd you do about your health?
It was like I said, I was exercising. Stress was really low.
Okay.
It was that my health was always and still is a work in progress because there's no cure. There's no magic pill. And so
I get it. I have anxiety. I'm an anxiety experiencer, I like to say. And there's no magic pill.
Yeah. So it's a work in progress, right? Yep. And so my belief was that with my health and the stress that came from my health, that by embracing a much smaller, because Vayner when I left was 750 people.
Right.
This was me and a guy, right? I was like, all right, it's gonna be a small business. There's 5 clients, and it's in a topic that I'm really passionate about, sports. And I've always been interested in the intersection of sports and business, and I think I could bring my background in venture capital and my background in client services and just my inherent understanding of sports to bring something interesting. And so worked with Brian, and we worked out a transaction where we bought a majority interest in his business. And I kind of eased my way in. I wasn't day-to-day grinding.
When you say we, is that you and Gary?
Yeah, we bought him. Yep, Gary and I bought a majority interest. Gary's a sports nut too.
Loves it.
He's the chairman of VaynerSports today. So he's not active day-to-day because he's a serial entrepreneur and has a bunch of other stuff going on. But for example, we're going to the Super Bowl on Thursday, and
who's in that game?
That's the Chiefs and the Eagles.
What was that last team?
Eagles.
Yeah,
I forgot.
I'm sorry. Just making sure we remember.
I forgot. You set me up good there. I love that.
I mean, you walked into it. That wasn't my fault.
I did. No, that's on me. That's on me. That's completely on me. I take it.
Yeah.
So like Gary, serial entrepreneur, he's running a 2,000 person ad agency. He speaks. He's got all these things. VFriends. He's got all these things. But he's still on Thursday night. We have a meeting with the parents of a great college player in football. And then on Friday, he's going to spend a few hours. We're taking a bunch of our football and baseball players to the Waste Management Open. And he's going to come do that for a few hours, spend time with our guys. So like he's involved and he loves it. So yeah, we decided to make that decision. And yeah, that's how VaynerSports came to be. And, the first year or so, I was kind of taking it easy because I didn't want to rush back too fast. I didn't want to fall into a cycle and become stressed and hate it and resent it. And, took my time and eased my way into it. And first year or two, and then it became clear to me that this is what I wanted to do and invested more capital. And we merged with a baseball agent and agency, which was great. Greg Genske and his shop. And we had a baseball division. And then we partnered up with Lloyd, like you talked about, and also launched gaming. And so we're now across those 4 sports. And I think we're about 45 employees, about 125 professional athletes or so that we represent across sports. And we're rolling and feeling really good.
What made you go into fighting? What made you want to go that route?
So I'll be very honest. Lloyd, because fighting was not on my list at all. Like
okay,
if you
so
said,
how'd you meet Lloyd?
Through Greg. So Greg, who we had just did the merger with,
because they had Lloyd. Baseball. Because
that's right. At Ballingy.
Yep.
That's right. So Greg knew Lloyd. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, like football was the first sport because of passion. Baseball was the next sport because really the next sport was always going to be baseball or basketball. And I got introduced to Greg and like, it was just the perfect partnership and it made all the sense in the world to do a merger. So we did baseball. And then, the next sport after baseball could have been basketball. It could have been hockey. It could have been golf. It could have been a lot of things. MMA was not high on that list, period. But Greg came to me and said, hey, I know this guy. And I think there's an opportunity. He's great. He's got a great client list. We should look at it. And then that's what happened. Just fell in love with Lloyd, fell in love with the business opportunity, saw the synergy of having football players that like MMA and seeing how it could be a cool synergy.
Look, everyone likes MMA, right?
Exactly.
Everyone likes MMA. All athletes like MMA.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Just because of the intensity of it, right? Like athletes love intensity, and there ain't like no one gets up to go to the bathroom during a fight. Where in the middle of the first quarter of a basketball game, or even the third quarter, if you got to piss, you just get up and piss and then come back. But nobody does that during a fight. Everyone's in their seat.
You're 100% right. And so what's kind of crazy for me, it's been a fun journey for me. And I've told a bunch of our fighting clients this. I was not an MMA fan. Not that I disliked it, but I've always was really just football and basketball from a sports viewership perspective. I would watch the occasional McGregor or Rousey fight, right? Just because they superseded MMA.
The sport.
Right. And one of my best friends was a big MMA fan. So like once or twice on bachelor parties, he would watch on a Saturday night and I would watch with him because I just like when people are passionate about stuff. Like, I don't care if it's MMA, gardening, origami. Like if somebody exudes passion for something, I'm captivated too, as long as I'm with them, right? If somebody's passionate about origami and I'm with them and they're doing origami, I'll be into it for an hour while I'm with them. But the second I leave, I never think about origami again.
I'm the right? Same way. Yeah, I feel you. Yeah.
But when we got into business with Lloyd, I started Zooming with our fighters. One of the cooler things is you and I did a Zoom and you walked me through, I think it was Corey Sandhagen, a fight that Corey had, and you walked me through it. And I got to see, once I really got to see fighting was more chess than knock a motherfucker out, that's when I got interested, right?
Got it.
And then I started Zooming with our clients and had an emotional attachment to the humans. And MMA fighters as a whole, for the most part, are just like the most humble, gracious, nicest people. How can you not root for them? How can you not root for Corey after having a 30-minute conversation with Corey, right? And so, or Drew Dober, right? And so I started watching our clients fight. And then I would be like, okay, our client is the main event and the kids are asleep and it's 11 o'clock and nothing else is really going on. Let me watch the fight before Corey's fight. And so I would watch two guys fight, and I'd be like, oh, that was interesting. And then, a month later, maybe Corey's opponent and another fighter I had watched previously are fighting, 6 months later. I'd be like, oh, let me watch that fight because I'm curious. The guy that lost to Corey, but the guy that won that other fight, they're fighting. I want to see how, like, MMA math.
What's coming?
I wanted to watch I wanted to watch the MMA math. And then it was like, okay, nice. Like, Stipe's got a big fight coming up against, unfortunately he lost his fight to Ngannou, but let me go watch the first Stipe Ngannou fight. And then I started going into the archives, and then we represent classic guys like Vitor and Uriah and Weidman. So then I'm getting to know Weidman, and I go watch him beat Silva. I go watch Vitor John Jones. And so now I'm in the archives, and I'm just watching shit, and I'm super into it. And now I watch UFC cards that don't have any of our fighters on it. And it worked out. A huge reason my MMA fandom got to blossom is because it's at such a great time for me as an East Coaster. Everybody's asleep, right? Like,
and you stay up.
And I stay up, right?
So I hate East Coast fights for that reason. Yeah, I can't stand East Coast fights.
Trust me, I hate it too. The next morning when I'm up with my three crazy ass kids, and I went to bed at 2 a.m. But I love it because it doesn't take away from my responsibilities as a husband and a father.
Got it.
And I'm able to watch it. And so if we've got a guy fighting and it's 11 p.m., my wife's asleep, my 3 kids are asleep, and I'm just locked in on the couch enjoying myself.
Got it. Yeah. So East Coast, the only thing I don't like about the travel opening back up is going to other countries and East Coast fights. I remember once Neil Magny fight in Brazil. We walked to the cage at 3 a.m.
Yeah, that's super tough. And yeah, we it is. And like, I mean, last week's card was insane. I was so grateful we didn't have anybody on that card. But like, wasn't the Derek Lewis fight at like 3 a.m.?
Yeah, it's because they were on Korea
Asia
time.
Yeah, exactly. They were covering Korea, which I was just so glad that like Drew or somebody didn't have a fight on that card. I'd just be like, fuck me, I gotta be up at 3 a.m. to watch our guy fight. But generally speaking, I prefer the East Coast 10 p.m. start because I can watch and I can chill, and I'm not being a bad dad or husband or anything like that.
How did you build this culture at Vayner with the agency? Because, for example, even Sarah, for example, who no one knows, right? The only way you know Sarah is if you have a fighter. Okay. Right. She's amazing. She truly, I had a situation last fight, for example, right? Like where Drew's fight got moved a week. He was supposed to fight December 10th. They moved it to December 17th. I had a retreat in Hawaii that I already had I had 10 people signed up for. They all paid $4,000. Yeah. Right. Like, so man, this is an issue now. Right. Because because Drew and I coordinated on the front end. Like, he's like this, but then all of a sudden, boom, it changes. Sarah just worked it out for me. And like that's not like, she could just be like, Elliot, work that, like, fuck off. Most agents are like, fuck off. Right? That's not the fighter's problem. Right. So Sarah coordinated with the UFC for me to work out all of my flights, how I asked for them to be, so that I got to Hawaii to do my retreat on time. That is a culture thing. That is not a Sarah's cool thing, which she is as well. Right. Yeah. Like, I love Sarah. Yeah. How did you guys create that? And that's only my example of how great.
But I'll be honest. I don't want to take credit for that because, like, that's how Lloyd and Sarah rolled before we got to work together. Like, that is, I don't want to take credit for that. But what I will say is, I think my indirect way of answering your question is that if you look at our client roster and if you look at our staff, it's almost self-selecting in the sense that without Lloyd and Sarah being the way that they are, we would have never brought them on, and we would have never had a combat division. So I think it's more that, like, we saw the world the same way. And I guess to answer your question, the way we've been able to build this culture is by having a clear understanding of, like, what we're about and what we're trying to accomplish, and only bringing on people that share that same vision.
So values,
core values.
Yeah.
Because our core value is not to tell our client's coach to fuck off. That's not our core value. And if that was the core value when I first met Lloyd, I would have told Greg, I don't want to partner with this guy.
Right. I mean, look, they wouldn't like no one. I shouldn't have said fuck off, right? But
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Because no one's going to say fuck off, but they're going to be like, Elliot, here, you can handle that, right? Which is fuck off, right?
There's levels of fuck off. I know what you meant.
Yeah.
We strive to go the extra mile.
Yeah. Look, I consult with other martial arts schools, and we have an online coaching thing, and the first thing we handle, first some of the setup of like, okay, what's your organization look like and understanding that. And then it's like, look, the first thing we got to handle is core values. And they're like, dude, that's like some foo-foo, like, and it's not, it's just not, right? Like, because if it's all about making Gary and AJ or Elliot money, and no one gets on board. No one gets on board. 100%
right. I think that was probably the most important thing I learned from Gary, honestly, amongst other things. Just like, it was just so incredibly clear. Like he's so good at articulating his core values to staff. It's just, there's never any confusion about what's right or wrong or what we're trying to accomplish. And we're patient, and he crushes that piece of it.
It's so important though. Like that is the piece that, and if you do it wrong, it can go terribly wrong for sure. But you have to get so clear on them that, and you can't not live by them.
You have to practice what you preach, right? Because if I tell our 45 family members, here are our core values, and then on a day-to-day basis, I'm a hypocrite and don't follow those core values, my team will check out. They're gonna be like, this guy's full of shit. Like these core values are words on paper, they're not real. And so not only do you have to establish the core values, but you have to practice what you preach. And I'm a big believer in that.
Look, I think, and I didn't make this up. Obviously, somebody else much smarter than me did. You are who your family thinks you are.
Yeah.
Like who my wife and 2 kids think I am. Yeah. That's who I am.
Yeah.
I'm no one else, because you can't hide in the walls. Nope. And if you go to work in your business long enough, like I go to the Denver school every day, I can't hide because I'm there every day, right? Like Elliot comes out, right? And AJ will come out. And so they'll get to see very clearly who you are. And,
I agree.
And so if you're not doing it, then it's all, the whole thing crumbles.
I agree.
So, man, as I wrap up here with the questions, there's 2 questions that I ask everybody. Okay.
Great.
And look, this one isn't to toot my own horn. This is more of a, like, I don't want to be like, oh, I like you and you're cool answer. Like, sure, we know each other. Right. So, but look, you're already famous. You already have money. You're Gary Vee's brother. If you wanted to get on any podcast in the world, you could get on any podcast in the world. This one's going to do nothing for you. Like like financially, move the needle for VaynerSports, right? Like it's going to do nothing. So why take the time? You already said stress builds you. You're busy, right? Like, so why take the time and come on some dude's podcast? We text, we're homies. You're not my best friend. I'm not yours. Right. Like,
no, I love it. It's so real. Honestly, it goes back to, you did this for me in the sense that when we first started working with Lloyd, like you took the time out of your busy schedule, you got shit to do. And you literally just walked up. And by the way, when you and I first spoke, my MMA knowledge was a D- at best.
Sure.
Like I was a sports fan and I'm an astute entrepreneur. And I had a willingness to learn, but like you spent a half hour breaking down film and walking somebody through something, and you didn't have to do that. And so I'm a big believer in just like, I like spending time with good people with good intentions matters. And I'm not terribly concerned about ROI or how much this is going to help me moving forward. That doesn't mean anything. Because I think if globally you allocate your time in the right ways and you do the right thing and you do well and you align with good people, it's going to work out.
Look, I think people get too hung up on this has to bring me back something. And you never know what it brings you back.
That's right.
No
question.
Have no clue what it brings you back or when it's going to happen. Right. Or,
no question.
So that's the reason for that questioning to hear. 2, I believe everyone has a unique power, like a superpower, a gift that they go out. And I think a lot of people get this wrong. Sometimes I think you have to go give your gifts to the world. And if you truly embrace your gift and you truly know what it is and you truly give it, what it gives back to you is exponential in return.
Yeah.
So what do you think your gift is?
I think my gift is, I would summarize it as, I think I'm a world-class problem solver. I think that I hear this from a lot of people. And like problem solver is the culmination of a lot of things, but basically something bad happens. I digest it. I don't get emotional. I don't get I'm very even keeled. I think that's a mark of me as an entrepreneur. I don't get too high or too down. And I'm just very quick to problem solve. Like and it's something that I like doing. I think it comes naturally to me. I'm not easily rattled. I'll give you an example. And this is stupid as shit, but for some reason, it just kind of came to me. I had a flight. It was like 6 a.m. I had a 6 a.m. flight, and
which sucks.
But airport. I'm flying. I live in Westchester, New York. I'm flying out of LaGuardia, and I have a car service because I can't get an Uber that early in the burbs. So I'm in this car service, and I'm trying to get to the airport for 5 a.m. because that's how I like to do it. I like to get there an hour before takeoff. Usually TSA pre or clear gets me no problem.
Oh yeah.
I try to get it in early before takeoff. I can be more aggressive, but getting in 45 minutes before takeoff, it creates a little bit of anxiety and pressure.
I agree. Hour's the point. I want to show up at the airport 1 hour. That's exactly right.
So I want to be at 5 a.m. for a 6 a.m. flight.
Yep.
I'm in this car service, and we're on the highway heading towards Queens to LaGuardia, and a tire blows. And we're on the highway, and this guy's tire blows, and he starts pulling over, and instantly I'm like, holy shit, what now? How am I gonna make this flight? I gotta make this flight. It's an important flight. I'm day tripping Dallas for an important meeting. I gotta make this flight. And he's pulling over, and I'm just diagnosing, like, what do I do in real time? And I look up from my phone, and we're about 500 feet away from an exit. And like the tire goes, but we're not in like danger.
It didn't like blow out and you have the tires off.
We're not like losing. Yeah, we're not losing, but clearly the tire's out. And I go to the guy driving. I'm like, hey, like, do me a huge favor. Please just make it to the exit. Because if you pull over here, I'm not getting an Uber. Like, can you just pull over to the exit? And he's like, no problem. We're fine. Like, we're on the shoulder. Hazards are on. It's 500 feet, if that. And he pulls off, and right off the exit, there's like a gas station. I'm like, hey, let's just go into the gas station. Goes in the gas station, and I immediately order an Uber, and I'm on my way, right? And I showed up 5 minutes late. It cost me 5 minutes. And again, this is stupid. This is like the 912th best example. But I remember the reason I probably remember it is I'm like in the Uber, and I'm on my way to the airport, and I call my mom and dad. They're always up stupid early. And I'm just talking to them like, you won't believe what happened. And I tell them what happened. And both my mom and dad are like, wow, that's incredible. Because what we would have done is we would have just like, oh my God. They just would have thrown their hands in the air.
Wallow in it.
They would have wallowed in it. And part of it is the age, they're in their late 60s. They're not thinking about Uber. Like, they're not thinking that way. They're not business travelers. They don't, like, my dad's an entrepreneur, but he doesn't fly 100 times a year. And it was just kind of like a funny thing. And then, like, again, personal thing, like, stupid, not an example, but I kind of like it because it shows how I am as a human, not as an operator. My last weekend, my wife was going on a girls trip with two of her best friends. They're all moms, and they were getting like, they're all moms with kids the same age, and they really haven't done a trip in a few years because of COVID and the kids. And they're going to Austin, Texas. This is last Thursday. And of course, Texas gets like an ice storm like a day or two before the trip.
Yeah.
And so they're like worried about and it's like 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm probably playing video games, I think, with my friends. And my wife's upstairs, like kind of winding down, ready to call it a night. And she texts me, she goes, holy shit, my flight got canceled. And I go upstairs, and her immediate reaction is like, you know what? Like, the weather's shitty. My flight's canceled. Like, maybe we just shouldn't go. And I'm like, you haven't been on like a girls trip in 5 years. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, there has to be a solution. She's like, there's no other flights to Austin tomorrow. And I'm like, well, go Friday. She's like, oh, at that point, now it's one less day. I'm like, there has to be something. And I literally just go in. I'm looking at my phone, Google Maps flights. I'm like, babe, you can fly into San Antonio. San Antonio's an hour and a half south. They didn't get ice. All the flights today and yesterday were fine. Fly into San Antonio. Let's get you a car service. Like, come on. Like, go on your trip.
Happen. Right.
Yeah. Go on your trip. And she's like, and like she says thank you. Her two friends text me like, thank you for figuring it out. Like, and again, stupid, silly, trivial stuff, but like that's my mode.
Yeah, but how you do anything is how you do everything.
Exactly. And
right?
that's my reaction always.
Yeah.
And it's just like, hey, something's wrong. And like my brain goes into like X, Y, 1, 2, 5, this opportunity.
You don't even care about the problem anymore. You're just solving it. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm numb to the problem. I feel nothing. I'm literally just in execution mode. And I feel like there's always an answer.
I have a really good friend. Like he's my friend. He's more of my a mentor of mine. He just retired. He just retired from Trimble. You know, Trimble, the engineering. Yeah. So he was the COO of Trimble.
Oh wow.
For a very long time, and he's the same way. He's unemotional about everything. Like there's just not a problem.
And listen, I'll grieve. Like God forbid, like somebody dies.
Right.
Like I'll grieve. I'm not a robot. But if there's something that needs to happen, I'm willing to like jump up and make it happen.
Look, it's not unemotional towards people. It's a different a different skill, right? You're not closed off or a sociopath. It's something totally different, right? Like
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Dude, he's the best human. Same thing, right? Like he helps all of us.
Yeah.
Like he has no reason to fucking help me. I'm, like he's worth millions.
I think that's my superpower.
Cool. Well, all right, man. I appreciate you coming on. Tell everyone where they can reach out, VaynerSports, all that stuff. If they want to contact you, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter and Instagram, I'm at AJV, those 3 letters. AJ at VaynerSports is my email. People we got going on with VaynerSports.
Cool. Guys, as always, don't go out in the world and try to be AJ. He's got his unique, special gift that he gives to the world. And don't go out in the world and try to be me. I've got my thing that I do and I give to the world. Everybody go out there and find your own power.
No doubt. Appreciate it, brother.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found something useful that you can take and implement into your life. Don't forget to head over to wherever you are listening to this podcast and leave a review. That would be greatly appreciated. Also, go follow me on social media at FireMarshal205 on Instagram. Leave a comment, anything that you would like there. And as always, if you think this would be useful for somebody else that you know for their life, send it their way. That would be greatly appreciated. That's it for this episode, guys. I hope you all have a great day and you go step into that power so that you can give your purpose to the world.